In Quito, Ecuador. I am Stefania Bravo, and this is From the South. Presidential candidate Fernando Haddad has visited former President Lula da Silva in prison to discuss how to approach the second round of Brazil's presidential election. The Workers' Party candidate says he's optimistic he will be able to beat far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro despite the 17 points difference in the first round. The PT candidate says that during these 3 weeks, their two projects for Brazil will be properly discussed.
We will have a very important opportunity to compare these two proposals so that the voter has an opportunity that, in my opinion, they did not have in the first round. So the opportunity is very important for us.
And Lula da Silva has encouraged Brazilians to support Haddad. Via Twitter, the former president made a call for volunteers to support the Workers' Party candidate. The Workers' Party has drawn up a plan of measures to boost Haddad's campaign in the lead-up to the runoff. The plan includes creating WhatsApp groups among millions of supporters to share with family and friends the candidate's proposals and make him better known, face-to-face contact with similar groups to explain the threats of barbarism that leading candidate Jair Bolsonaro represents, and explaining why Haddad is the only candidate with the qualities and experience to lead Brazil, and making better use of the PT's website and social media to spread the message. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemos, has more.
So the first round of the elections is done, with 46% for Jair Bolsonaro, the far-right candidate, and 29% for the Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad. This is the new situation. We'll have a second round on October the 28th between the progressive forces and the ultra-right. Straight after the results, Fernando Haddad had announced that his campaign would start today. His first visit was to Lula da Silva in Curitiba. There he called on the different forces from the center to the left to unite in defense of Brazilian democracy. The question is whether with this the PT will be able to turn around the results, because there is a strengthening of the conservative and even military sectors who are clearly opposed to democracy in Brazil, who defend the military dictatorship and who have won a significant number of seats in Congress. And there's also been a rise in hate crimes, homophobic and sexist attacks and so on. So we'll have to see if this call by the Workers' Party to defend democracy with social justice is enough. Last night, a teacher of capoeira in Bahia was murdered after saying that he had voted for Haddad by a group of Bolsonaro supporters. So this is the worrying situation we see now after the first round of the presidential election. One side calling for freer gun laws, the other calling for social programs and better access to education in the run-up to the 28th of October.
We thank Nacho Lemos for that report. And now let's take a closer look at the results in the first round. Bolsonaro needed to win 50% of votes +1 to win the presidency. He only obtained 46%, while Haddad won 29% of the votes. As for the rest of the candidates, center-left candidate Ciro Gomes remained in third place with 12% of the votes, and right-wing candidates Geraldo Alckmin and Enrique Meireles won 4.7% and 1.2% respectively. The Sao Paulo Stock Exchange surged more than 6% in early trading. News of Bolsonaro's unexpectedly large lead in the first round was welcomed by the markets. The rise was led by shares in state-controlled companies, which the far-right candidate has promised to privatize. Brazil's currency, the real, also climbed against the dollar. An indigenous woman in Brazil will take a seat in Congress for the first time. Lawyer Joenia Wapichana is the second indigenous person elected for the lower house. The first one was Mario Jurana back in 1982. Wapichana ran with the ecologist party Rede and will represent the Amazonian state of Roraima. The Brazilian Congress will also have a trans person taking a seat for the first time. Erika Malunguinho is an Afro-trans woman who was elected for Sao Paulo. During her campaign with the PSOL, she said she would fight for an end to the violence against LGBTI people and other minorities. Brazilian political scientist João FtS has said Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad has to reach out to the voters outside his party, especially in the center, to increase his chances of winning the presidential election runoff in 2 weeks' time.
Well, I think he has to conquer voters from, outside his party electorate constituency. So he has to appeal to the center, the old formula of capturing the center. He really has to go for it and to, start conversations, negotiations with political forces to the right of PT. Because, the forces to the left of PT are already voting for him, so they have no choice. So he has to actually try to save Brazilian democracy from its greatest threat, which is Bolsonaro. It is true, PT is the largest party, but, Congress is a game of numbers, right? And comparing this Congress to the past ones, this one is much more conservative. And I think another reason for concern is the presence of the second largest party, which is Bolsonaro's party, made out of people who are very much focused on the agenda of security. They defend, arms for everybody, guns, for everybody as a solution for violence, for security, personal security. So it's pretty bad.
Another social movement leader has been murdered in Colombia. Jaime Rivera was a human rights campaigner and a member of the Coca substitution program in the department of El Cauca. He and his 2 sons were killed on Saturday. Rivera's death takes the number of community leaders murdered in Colombia to 474 since 2016. 27 leaders have been killed since President Iván Duque came to office 2 months ago. A UN report has confirmed that the countries that signed the Paris Climate Agreement are far from fulfilling their commitments. In fact, the global climate is on track for an increase of 3 to 4 degrees Celsius if countries continue on their present course. An urgent transformation of the world economy is required to avoid global chaos. The report from scientists of the IPCC says the use of fossil fuels needs to be cut by 40% by 2030 in order to achieve the goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Limiting global warming to 1.5 compared to 2 degrees would reduce the number of people exposed to climate-related risks and susceptible to poverty by up to several hundred millions by 2050.
Carbon dioxide emissions would need to decline substantially before 2030 to avoid warming of more than 1.5 degrees C in the middle of the 21st century, followed by large-scale carbon dioxide removal.
And earlier we talked to Gregory Nemeth, professor of environmental studies at the Wisconsin-Madison University, who defends the use of negative emissions technology to prevent global warming. He says these need to be combined with clean energy.
The good news is that we have a lot more tools at our disposal than we did 10 or 20 years ago. Wind power is cheaper, solar power is cheaper, electric vehicles are becoming feasible, but even those is not enough to do what we need to do to reduce emissions in the atmosphere. The problem is that unlike other types of air pollution, like local air pollution that you see in cities, rain and they don't just fall out of the sky in a couple of weeks. Those gases stay in the atmosphere for decades and a century. So if we need to do something about the problem quickly, we need to take CO2 out of the atmosphere directly.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Series of controversial tax reforms last Friday. It's the 5th week of union-led protests where workers downed tools. The tax reform project has been driven by President Carlos Alvarado Quesada. One more vote is needed for final approval of the measure. Our correspondent in San Jose, Fernando Francia, has the latest.
Here we are in Justice Square, which is the headquarters of the judicial power. The protest has moved from the assembly to this square because the justice system is one of the institutions to be consulted about the tax reform. Protesters want the courts to reject this package of 4 laws that was approved by 35 against 22 votes last Friday. but the general strike will continue for an indefinite period after this first month. They will keep until this plan is rejected, and a roundtable with citizens and different productive sectors is called to produce a new tax reform that supports workers.
We thank Fernando Francia for that report, and today marks the 51st anniversary of the assassination of the revolutionary leader Ernesto Che Guevara. Progressive leaders in Latin America have been commemorating the date. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro celebrated Che Guevara's legacy, saying on Twitter, "Che's conviction for the construction of a decent and equal world continues to inspire new generations who fight against the interventionist actions of the U.S. empire." Bolivian President Evo Morales also celebrated Che Guevara via Twitter. Morales recalled that in 1967, Ernesto Che Guevara fought his last battle in Bolivia. He was captured and transferred to La Higuera, where he spent his last hours. We commemorate and appreciate your fight. Hasta la victoria siempre. Bolivia is about to choose a new junior partner to help industrialize its lithium deposits. The country has already reached an agreement with a conglomerate of German companies to start exploiting one of the deposits. There are also Russian and Chinese firms interested. Bolivia is believed to have one of the largest lithium reserves in the world. Colombia has registered a 14% increase in children dying of starvation. A report by the Ombudsman Office has rung the alarm, but organizations say the government is ignoring it. 162 children under 5 have died of starvation and associated causes between January and September this 2018. 21 more compared to the previous year. Organizations are urging the government to take measures. Authorities in Haiti have set up a makeshift hospital to help people injured in Saturday's earthquake. At least 14 people were killed and 150 others injured in the 5.9 magnitude earthquake. Those most seriously hurt were taken by air ambulance to the capital, Port-au-Prince, for treatment. A 5.2 magnitude aftershock was felt on Sunday. No additional casualties were recorded. Saturday's tremor is one of the strongest to hit Haiti since the 7.0 magnitude earthquake of 2010, which killed over 200,000 people. Heavy rains have battered Central American countries, killing at least 12 people. The torrential rains caused mudslide in Honduras, which killed 2 children and their mother. The rain destroyed houses and forced thousands to leave their homes. According to local authorities, 6 people were killed in Honduras and 7,000 were forced to evacuate. In El Salvador, the head of the country's civil protection agency said 2 people were killed and 10 others injured. A festival in Mexico City over the weekend showcased traditional Mexican stories and promoted their local traditions.
For some people, it is only tradition. But for the organizers of this event, this festival means much more. They try to rescue the history behind Mexican craftsmanship, music, and food.
Mexico has a lot of traditions and culture that must be carried on. That is why we decided to create this festival, to preserve our stories.
Epifanio Mendez says that he learned pottery when he was a kid. Now, at 86 years old, it is very important to him to teach his knowledge to new generations.
I feel very proud. I feel happy because our craftsmanship and the Zapoteca language are still alive.
Among Mexican traditions, music has a special meaning. Young people from the capital have even appropriated the cultural heritage of other regions in the country, like a rhythm known as son guerrerense.
We found ourselves in this path. We liked it and we wanted to devote ourselves to it. For us, it represents joy, music, playing something that is being forgotten.
Almost no Mexican celebration is complete without confetti. The family makes party decorations for Christmas and Dia de los Muertos, the same way they were made generations ago.
We are very proud when people congratulate us, because we still make confetti by hand.
In a nation with 61 languages still being spoken, Mexican stories Craftsmanship, gastronomy, and music are intangible heritage, and they must be preserved.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thousands of students and lecturers in Zambia are protesting police brutality after a female student was killed when police fired tear gas into her room. Vespers Chimusila, a fourth-year student at the University of Zambia, suffocated. Another student fractured her legs and spine after she jumped from the third floor of her hostel to escape a fire caused by a tear gas canister.
The sheer unprofessional conduct of the police who acted in a brutal way to basically discharge tear gas in a room at that time of the night. As a former student of that university, I know what university life is. I know that demonstrations have always been there. Even more than 30 years ago, when I left university, demonstrations were there, we found them, they will continue. It's the nature of universities.
And in Cameroon, opposition candidate Maurice Kamto is declaring victory in the presidential polls, despite the government warning not to announce unofficial results. Kamto, in making the declaration, says he believes he achieved his goal in Sunday's vote. At a media conference, he also called on President Paul Biya to hand over power peacefully. Biya, who is 85, has ruled Cameroon for nearly 4 decades.
I call on the incumbent President of the Republic to organize the conditions for a peaceful transition of power in order to protect Cameroon from a post-electoral crisis that our country does not need.
And Madagascar's election race officially begins with 3 presidential hopefuls launching campaigns ahead of the November 7th polls. This follows months of political tensions. Former President Marc Ravalomanana is once again throwing his hat into the ring. Andry Rajoelina, the 2009 coup leader, is also contesting. Both men express confidence going in.
I really trust in our victory. You are the proof that Antananarivo is ours.
I am convinced that in a month and a half, we will start writing a new story for Madagascar.
Spanish gynecologist Eduardo Vela has been acquitted by a court in Madrid in the famous stolen babies case. The doctor was found guilty of faking births and falsifying official documents. However, the 86-year-old couldn't be convicted because the statute of limitations on the case had run out. Dr. Vela was the first person to go on trial for his role in the stolen babies case during the dictatorship of Francisco Franco, where babies would be taken from their mothers and given to infertile families. The Turkish government is seeking permission to search Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul after a prominent Saudi journalist went missing there last week. This request was made after the foreign ministry summoned the Saudi ambassador for a second time over the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi.
We demand his immediate release if alive. If not, we would like to know what exactly happened to him and the details of what happened. And we demand from the international community to pressure Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman to tell us exactly what happened inside that consulate.
2018 Nobel Peace Prize awardee Nadia Murad says humanity and politics must go hand in hand. She made the appeal while speaking to the press in Washington. Back in 2014, Murad was held as a sex slave by Islamic State group militants alongside 7,000 other women and girls. After escaping, she became the face of a global campaign to free Yazidi people. On Friday, she won the Nobel Peace Prize and she calls for a more equal world.
Our humanity must be the basis of our politics and national interest. We should work together towards building a world that is fair, that is prosperous, and where every human is given the opportunity to live in dignity.
Two former Pakistan prime ministers and a prominent journalist have appeared in court on treason charges. The case centers around remarks made by former PM Nawaz Sharif during an interview with communist Cyril Almeida in May. Sharif suggested that Pakistan militants were behind the 2008 Mumbai attacks. The matter has been adjourned to October 22nd. The death toll from Indonesia's earthquake and tsunami has reached nearly 2,000. Authorities say around 5,000 people are still missing, indicating the death toll could still increase. In Palu, the worst hit district, recovery operations have partially ceased. The 7.5 magnitude quake triggered a tsunami, devastating the island of Sulawesi. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.